We, the Indian Society of Heating, Refrigerating and Air Conditioning Engineers, ISHRE, stand tall in the Indian industry with over 10,000 professionals as members and almost an equal number of student members. Founded in 1981 and headquartered in Delhi, we operate from chapters and sub-chapters spread all over India, bringing our entire industry together. Individuals become members of our society according to their professional and academic standings. Our roadmap of the future looks very bright, with thousands of new members joining this legal society every year and bringing in a fresh outlook to our industry intelligence. Which consists of some of the best minds of our industry. It publishes technical books, newsletters, and a prestigious journal, distributing the wealth of knowledge to all its members. Working with government departments, ISHRE helps formalize industry codes and standards. ISHRE promotes research by offering financial support to student members to carry out groundbreaking work in technology, systems, and processes. Our educational wing, ISHRE Institute of Excellence, organizes training programs and workshops to help members enhance their skill sets. Our specially designed certification programs under ICP, that is, ISHRE Certified Professional, empower professionals to always be in step with prevailing technology. Specially designed courses for technicians are offered to meet the ever-increasing demand for a skilled workforce. ISHRE organizes exhibitions, conferences, panel discussions, and product presentations throughout the country. We organize the industry's largest international exposition in South Asia, Tricks India, to showcase the cutting-edge technology, innovation, and provide a platform for closer interactions amongst the decision makers in the industry. The ACREX exhibition is now growing from HVAC and R show into PFA, Build Bear Allied. Brings together several allied shows connected with the building services industry all at one location. Our chapters organize several other popular events like AgriConf in Delhi, Raycon in Kolkata, Symposia in Mumbai, TechFest in Goa, and many more. We are committed to provide training and career guidance to our student members through seminars, lectures, quiz contests, and site visits. AQuest, a prestigious quiz competition organized by ISHRE to catalyze the transformation of the budding engineering professionals. ISHRE provides a platform to potential employers to select student members for careers in HVAC and R industry at the ISHRE Job Junction. Young minds are made aware of the need for saving power, clean air, and sustainability. The K-12 initiative of ISHRE focuses attention on school students' development to inculcate a scientific fervor and help develop them into responsible citizens. Speedy information is imperative to keep moving forward in this hyper-connected digital age. Searcher, a specifically designed search engine, is now available, which allows access to a well-catalogued database on HVACR and building services industry with just a few clicks. ISHRE cooperates with various national and international bodies, industry, governments, academia, think tanks to promote the concept of sustainability, environmental protection, and energy efficiency and conservation. To enter and explore the universe of the Indian HVACR industry, log on to ishre.in that unfolds a panorama of information Let us engineer a sustainable future together through ISHRAE.
Yes, Sandeep ji.
So, good evening, everyone. I am Sandeep Goyal, Program Chair, ISHRAE Jodhpur Subchapter. Welcomes you in distinguished lectures on indoor environmental quality, hosted by Jodhpur Subchapter with support of Jaipur chapters. Now, I like to request our chapter president, Mr. N.K. Sethi sir, to welcomes you the speaker. N.K. Sethi sir.
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep. Thanks, Kishanji. And welcome to all. Very well. Yes. On behalf of ISHRAE Jodhpur subchapter and Jaipur chapter, it will be honor for me to introduce Mr. Jyotirmay Mathur to all of you. Mr. Jyotirmay Mathur is a personality in HVAC sector who doesn't need an introduction. He worked as a Dean of Research and Development, Dean as International Affairs. He's a founder head of Center of Environment Energy, MNIT. He's a mechanical engineer, done his post-graduation in energy studies, IIT Delhi, and doctorate from University of Assam. He's a well-known face in academics and authored many books. Is a member of many committees also, and currently he is the head of the incubation center MNIT Jaipur. Now, without wasting more time, I want to request Mr. Mathur to give a lecture on indoor environment quality. Over to Mr. Mathur.
Okay. Can you give me the screen? Good evening, everybody.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, yes, sir, visible.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and it's nice to be with you this evening. I hope everybody is keeping good health under this scare of COVID-19. The title given by Sandeep to me was Indoor Environmental Quality. I have slightly extended, although the topic remains the same, indoor environment quality. But through this presentation, what I will do is I will tell you about the indoor environmental quality standard that was developed by ISHRAE. I will connect it within this 40 minutes with the present era of COVID precautions that we are into, and we'll give you some case study also about our measurements that we have taken in indoor environmental quality. In this opening slide, I always love to keep this picture because this picture is the day when the first version of this standard was released. That was in 2016 at the Green Building Congress. You can see Dr. P.C. Jain, Mr. Ashish Rakheja is also there, who was the chair of this committee. I had the privilege of co-chairing this committee together with other colleagues like Mr. Manjunath and other industry stalwarts. So why this standard is important to us and so dear to us is globally, this is the first comprehensive standard for indoor environmental quality. What I mean by indoor environmental quality is it is comprising of 4 independent considered spheres or spaces, which are actually not independent. I'll come to that on my subsequent slides. And now where we stand is we have 2019 version, that is the second version of this standard that was released last year, and that is pretty much taken by industry. So this is what I meant, that there are 4 areas of indoor environmental quality. When we talk about indoor environmental quality, we definitely mean by thermal comfort, which people understand is temperature and humidity alone, but we'll go to this section and see what all comes in addition to temperature and humidity when we talk about thermal comfort. The second area which has become very important nowadays is indoor air quality. Indoor air quality, people talk about PM10, PM2.5, but yes, there are again a lot of other parameters to be looked into. Thermal and comfort and air quality both are related. You always have a filter in your air conditioner, whatever type it is, and that primarily has the role of giving you good air quality. To what level it gives you a good level of air quality, that is a secondary issue. But yes, that is expected to give you a good level of air quality. The third area of IEQ is lighting quality. And lighting quality word is important, not just the lighting amount. And I'll once again, when coming to lighting section, I'll cover that what we mean when we talk about lighting quality. And the fourth area, which is often neglected in India particularly, and it is very critical when you go to Europe and other countries, acoustic comfort. And acoustic comfort is basically related to the sound that we get. So if your thermal comfort giving device, which is air conditioner, creating a lot of noise, that will affect my fourth quadrant, that is acoustic comfort. And thermal comfort, if it is overcooling or undercooling, people may get some discomfort and they may perceive that air quality is bad, or vice versa. Sometimes air quality is bad and some they perceive as if thermal comfort is bad. So these four are actually linked to each other, and in our opinion, they should not be looked into in isolation. So you should look at them very comprehensively, and that is why Ishri thought that we should combine them in one single standard, and we became a global leader. We are very proud of that and now other countries are following that. So why, when I'm talking about IEQ, now we are very clear what do we mean. The other common term is IAQ, but when we are talking about IAQ, we only mean by air. So IAQ is a subset of IEQ. So IEQ, when we talk about, why we talk about it quite often and why is it important? Some studies have been conducted, not some, I would say many studies have been conducted, which prove that wellness, how well people are in my office, that directly affects my productivity. So if people are not very well, if they are stressed, if they are sick, my total output from my office gets adversely affected. So people have a very strong feeling, and that is a fact also, that wellness is leading to productivity. And what governs your wellness is basically my indoor environment quality. If I have bad air in my office, if I have mold getting generated in my office, if I have a lot of particulate matter in my office, if I have under illumination in my office, my employees will get different kinds of problems. It may be headache, it may be soring eyes, it may be irritation in nasal path or any other thing, which may affect their wellness and in turn will adversely affect productivity of my organization. So therefore, if you want to have high productivity, you should have better IEQ, indoor environment quality, and that is what is well established quantitatively also, as well as subjectively. People understand it from ancient times also. So when we talk about productivity loss, and when we talk about that productivity loss can be because of poor IEQ, uh, what are the hints? What are the hints you can capture without even going for measurements? So one is your employees can go for frequent sick leaves. So if there are frequent sick leave, somebody is getting headache, somebody is having blood pressure, somebody is having change in specs numbers, and so on and so forth. So if sick leaves is a indication that there is something wrong in your environment also. It may be because of personal reasons, but yes, office environment or home environment can also be responsible for that. Environment, when I say, I specifically mean indoor environment, not the social environment or any other environment that we may talk of. Frequent bio breaks in office session, in work sessions. So if my staff is taking frequent bio breaks, that is also one indicator of not so good indoor environment quality. Why I say so is we all would have experienced that if the temperature is quite low, we have freezing palms, and just in order to get some warmth, we like to go out from the space where we usually sit. We may like to go to a veranda or to a sun space or something where we gather some warmth and then be normal and come back. If it is too warm, then of course I sweat and I become uncomfortable, and people may like to go for toilet and whatever. So bio breaks are quite good indicator of uh, bad indoor environment quality. More tea, coffee consumption, again the same. If I am stressed out because of work or because of indoor environment quality, I would go for uh, frequent bio breaks as well. So these things are indicators of what I'm likely to uh, have in my office. Now, more mistakes in draft and calculations. I have given some work to my assistants and there are more mistakes, again indicators. So all these basically affect your productivity, basically affect the working of your office. So going to the next slide. This is a very good study I like, and I would like you to focus at the bottom of this slide, bottom right hand corner, and that is written HBR, and HBR stands for Harvard Business Review. So this study comes from a very highly reputed journal, Harvard Business Review. And to the bottom left, you can see that there are two gentlemen who are quite renowned in the area of human comfort and productivity. Mr. Richard Didier is none other than the author of kind of adaptive thermal comfort concept in ASHRAE 55 standard, which is of thermal comfort. So this study was conducted by them, and what they show in this study is that what are various factors that are anti-productivity, that is resulting into productivity loss in any organization. And the highest, as you can see, which I have circled, one is sound privacy. Sound privacy is something which is the foremost parameter, and people definitely have their productivity getting affected if sound privacy is not there. We all know right from our student days until now. So that is there. But sound privacy depends upon what kind of office you have, whether you have a cubicle, whether you sit in an open space, whether you sit in your private office. So it depends upon so many other factors than any particular standard. So beyond certain limit, many people cannot do anything. But yes, a lot can be done within those limits also. Noise level is definitely important. And then third is temperature. You can see the temperature is important. Fourth is air quality. Fifth is visual comfort. Sixth is amount of light. And these all factors are sufficient enough to establish that many things related to indoor environment quality are actually affecting productivity. So if productivity is so important, let us understand first of all how to evaluate productivity. Are there any scientific methods? And then whatever discussion, small discussion we will have in one or two subsequent slides, we will be assuming that there is 5% productivity loss. Whereas there are studies that show that there are as high as 20-25% productivity losses registered in offices, but we will assume a very modest, very conservative 5% productivity loss for our further discussions. So let us do some cost analysis, because decisions in buildings, whether it is air conditioning system, whether it is lighting design, whether it is filtration or any other thing, fitting of acoustic panel or something like that, is cost dependent. And your client would first of all ask you, yes, whatever you're saying is good, but what is the cost and what is the effectiveness of that? So cost analysis has to be done, and let us also start that. So let us take a building which is having a conditioned area of 10,000 square meter, and 10,000 square meter building is not a very small building, reasonable size building, and the cost which I'm taking is 30,000 rupees per square feet. If I approximately convert to per square feet, which people are familiar with, it boils down to roughly 3,000 rupees per square feet, which is on a higher side. But yes, there will be, this higher side is making the estimate more conservative. So let's do that. So the total cost of my building becomes 30 crore. You can cross-check my calculations, and if something wrong, just let me know. But yes, if I have 10,000 square meter building and 30,000 rupees per square meter, This is 30 crore rupees total cost. EPI is a term many of you will be familiar with. It stands for Energy Performance Index. And Energy Performance Index is a parameter using which you can ascertain energy efficiency of a building. In fact, star rating of buildings is given by looking at this parameter only. Energy Conservation Building Code also asks you to calculate this EPI. So EPI is nothing but you have the total energy consumption in terms of kilowatt hour of your building. You divide it by the area of that building. I'm talking about the overall year. So you sum up the total energy consumption of your building. Maybe you can take all the electricity bills, add the kilowatt hour consumption together, and that number to be divided by the carpet area of your office or any building that you are considering. That gives you the EPI number. So 100 kilowatt hour is actually a very good efficient building that I'm taking. So I'm assuming that the building is very efficient so that the electricity bill is low. Again, that is making my estimate conservative. So I'll go for that. Cost of energy I'm assuming rupees 10 per kilowatt hour, which is quite reasonable considering the prevailing rates in commercial buildings. So if I have 100 kilowatt hour per square meter, I multiply this by the total conditioned area, that is 10,000 square meter. That makes, and multiply that by 10 rupees per kilowatt hour, you arrive at this number. 1 crore per year is my cost of energy. So if I have an efficient building, still my cost of electricity in this building will be 1 crore. I'm taking that this building is running for 40 years, building life is 40 years, and therefore the cost of electricity over 40 years, assuming a flat rate, again that is making my estimate conservative. The cost of electricity in lifetime of this building will be 40 crore. Let us take the number of persons who are likely to sit in this building. The number of persons who are likely to sit in this building, 10,000 square meter. I'm assuming 10 square meter area is available to each person. And so 1,000 persons are likely to work in this office. This number again can be more or less, but I'm taking approximate number. Average salary, if I'm working in a building which is located in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Hyderabad, or any other big city, even in Jaipur nowadays, cost of 10 lakh, the salary, annual salary of 10 lakh rupees per annum is not that high. So CTC, cost to company for any person, average is 10 lakhs, what I'm assuming, because salaries are ranging, are touching or crossing even 1 crore. What happens is after COVID, don't ask me. That's a difficult question, but this is what is prevailing right now. So average salary is 10 lakh. If I estimate what is my salary cost of these 100 staff total, 1,000 persons totally, so that gives me a number of 100 crore. So 100 crore is my salary bill of this building. What happens is, I'm assuming, initially I had mentioned that we are assuming 5% productivity loss from this building. 5% productivity loss, what does it boil down to? 5% of 100 crore makes it 5 crore per year. So just because I'm not providing them a good environment, working environment, and if my productivity loss is 5%, I'm likely to lose 5 times the total cost of energy that my building has. And this is the seriousness. This is the seriousness of indoor environment quality. In fact, that is one strong reason why I myself, being from energy, started looking into indoor environment, because of the fact that without looking at indoor environment, talking about energy efficiency alone is not really the right thing. You can see the total cost of energy in this building is 1 crore. Even if I make it 20% more efficient, how much would I save? 20 lakhs only in a year. But if by providing them better environment at 20% higher electricity cost, maybe because of excess good or better use of lamp, maybe because of better filtration, maybe because of any other thing, what would it lead to? It would lead to much more output as compared to the cost. And that is why indoor environment quality is a important thing to look into. So if this is so important, what we did was we in ISHRE started thinking about what is to be done. So we first came up with a position paper in 2015 that what is the stand of ISHRE? That yes, in nutshell, the stand was that energy efficiency is good, but without having good indoor environment quality, which is a compromise of all combination of all the four, energy efficiency is not really a good concept. Without looking at these, if you overlook any one of these parameters, that is not really the best approach. That is what the position of ISHRE was. And then we set up a committee for developing the first version of the standard. We ourselves tried to implement it in different kinds of spaces, did monitoring of their indoor environment quality just to validate the standard that we had developed, whether the standard has become too lenient or too strict. So there was a project which was done by MNIT and IIT Chennai together, IIT Madras together, and which endorsed that yes, the standard that we have come up with is balanced. It is neither too strict nor too lenient. And then we also modified the standard after 3 years, and that is where we stand. So what is there in the standard is basically there are 3 levels. One is the minimum acceptable level, that is what we have defined as. Second is the acceptable level, which we call class B, and third is the aspirational level, which is class A. So a building or can be on any particular parameter class B, class C, or class A, depending upon what level of efforts they have put in for improving the indoor environment. And as we move from C to A, the threshold values for any particular parameter become stricter and stricter. And in fact, the aspirational level, which is class A, is matching with world's best standards. And the class B and class C actually is actually meeting minimum legal requirements in whatever areas they have. For example, CPCB has some guidelines, NBC also has some guidelines, and there are other guidelines from the various government agencies. So class C values are basically allowing you to ensure that you do all the code compliances and legal compliances. Class B is what most of the requirements in our green building kind of buildings are. And class A is aspirational, meaning thereby if somebody is saying that my building is very good and he belongs to Finland, if you have your class A building as per ISHRE standard, both the buildings are likely to give you same order of indoor environment quality, and they would not be very different. So this standard provides those threshold values that okay, threshold values of, for example, PM 2.5, that PM 2.5 value should not be more than this if you have to call yourself class A. PM more than if you have to call yourself class B or something like that. Okay, so method of what it is doing in addition is specifications of instruments used, because when we are talking about any indoor environment quality parameter, unless we measure something, it cannot be claimed that it is good or bad. So it should be measured first of all, and there can be n number of types of instruments that can be used. For example, air velocity, you can have a vane type anemometer, which is very cheap. I think 400-500 rupees you can get it for, or you can have a hot wire or hot film anemometer with very high precision and accuracy, which is about ₹1,00,000. So there is a significant variation in terms of quality of instruments. What we have done in this standard is we have specified what accuracy and what resolution is required for a instrument if you have to comply with the standard for measurement. Then method of taking measurement is also very important. Suppose you are in a room and somebody claims that temperature in this room is 25 degrees. I think all of you would agree with me that 25 degrees is not the temperature at all the points in the room or a hall. There are some hot pockets, there are some cold pockets, because air distribution is not uniform in most of the cases. So where do I make this measurement? Similarly, lighting, whether do I make the measurement right below the lamp, or if I have a 2 meter by 1 meter table, do I measure lux level at the center of the table, or at 4 corners I measure and take average of that, whatever. So there are standard methods of taking measurement that are specified in the standard. And then we have reporting formats, then we have evaluation formats, and then examples and illustrations are also there, and then there are references. So these are unique features of This particular standard, not many standards globally have many of these things. Concept. So let's come to the first section, which is thermal comfort, and the concept of operative temperature is what is used in thermal comfort. And operative temperature, when I say, it is a combination of indoor temperature, ambient temperature. When I say indoor temperature, air velocity, and mean radiant temperature. These three parameters together make my operative temperature. So far, a very common notion is that air temperature makes me comfortable or uncomfortable. Yes, primarily it does. But if you have higher air velocity, you can still be comfortable at higher temperature. If you have a very hot or very cold surface close to your seat, you may still be very uncomfortable or comfortable if your temperature is higher than usually preferred temperature. So what we have is this becomes very important because in India, we have high intensity of solar radiation and many buildings have large usage of glass. So if you are having glass and sun is directly throwing its radiation on the glass becomes very hot and it radiates heat to you. Despite having a low air temperature, you are likely to be very uncomfortable. So operative temperature is the parameter that is to be calculated by noting down air velocity, mean radiant temperature, and air temperature inside the room, and that is what the metric is. This graph, which is at the bottom right side, is basically allowing you to offset the temperature and calculate at what temperature you are likely to be comfortable. I'll just explain how to read this graph. Suppose, let us take the central line. Central line denotes where my air temperature and the average temperature of the surroundings have 0 degree temperature difference, which is same. Details about usage of this graph is given in the standard. On the y-axis, I have air velocity. So if I have air velocity, let's say this line which is shown is at roughly 0.8 meter per second. It touches my 0 degree, the graph, this graph at something like this point, and I drop a perpendicular on my x-axis from here, and it is likely to be something like 2.5. What does it mean? 2.5 means usually at still air, if people are comfortable at 25 degrees, you add 2.5 to that, which makes it 27.5. And most people are likely to be comfortable at 27.5 degrees centigrade if your air velocity is 0.8. Now you can note that as my air velocity increases, I get a higher value on the x-axis through the intersecting point, which means higher is the air velocity, higher is my comfort temperature. And this particular point is becoming very important in our today's time when we have COVID, and the COVID virus tendency is that it tends to have a lesser life at higher temperature. So there is no point, particularly at this moment, to set your thermostat at 22 or 23 or 24 or 25 even. Okay, try to set it as high as possible. Maybe you can use a ceiling fan or a table fan in addition to your air conditioner. There will be two advantages. One, by every degree temperature rise in your thermostat set point, you save about 3 to 4% of energy. That is one. Second, which is more important these days, is life of coronavirus becomes exponentially less as my temperature increases beyond 24. So this advantage, together with energy saving, is a win-win situation. So why not to capture that? So thermal comfort section of this indoor environment quality standard talks about it. Broadly, it gives a temperature range, as you can see in this table, that 24.5 is there, plus minus 2.5 in summer, and 22 plus minus 3 is in winter for offices and this kind of spaces. So this is broad range. Of course, flow value means resistance offered by my clothing. So 0.5 means I have less clothing. Obviously, in winters we have more clothing, so the resistance offered by my clothing is different. So I have to be talking in context of the kind of clothing I use in these. If in summer for any reason I have to use higher order of clothing, my temperature will be less. But usually you should not do that. So thermal comfort requirements are mentioned in this table. What you can see is that humidity 30 to 70% is the range that we are recommending in this standard, and same is the humidity range recommended. In fact, lower range of humidity is increased to 40% in the COVID guideline issued by ISHRE. So 40 to 70 is the range, but above 70 we don't recommend because you have mold and fungal growth and other problems coming in. You have radiant temperature asymmetry means your surfaces around you should not be very asymmetric in terms of temperature, and there are limits related to that. Vertical air temperature difference should not be more than 4 degrees, especially in class A building. Class B and class C we have relaxed this, and we are not expecting people to measure this, because more is the number of measuring points, more is the number of measuring parameters, more becomes the cost of measurement also. So that is what we don't want. And then if you are having if you claim class B, you should have 80% of your occupants being satisfied. The last row I'm reading, 80% of your people should be satisfied in your building. If you are claiming class A, 90% of your people should be satisfied. And for this, you have to conduct an occupant satisfaction survey. That is also given in the standard. Similarly, there are thresholds for air quality. For example, PM 2.5 is very common, or CO2 is very commonly talked about, or TVOC is what is very commonly talked about. So you can see that TVOC, the stringency is much less as in class C, which is 500 micrograms per meter cube. It reduces to 400 and it reduces to 200 if you are class A. And this is how this standard gives you different thresholds, different level of thresholds for different parameters. Some parameters which are difficult to measure, which are costly to measure, have been left for class C, so that somebody who's kind of interested in having a bare minimum requirement of IEQ met, he should not incur a very high cost. So if your TVOC level increases a certain limit, we also recommend that you should go into the breakup of TVOCs, and that is the new approach in 2019 version. There are two compliance paths, two compliance options in IAQs particularly. One is the spot measurement, another is the continuous measurement. As you can see, path A and path B. If you are having spot measurement, your equipment should be very highly accurate and random sampling should be done. Continuous measurement, you can have relatively lesser accuracy of your instruments, but yes, they have to continuously record. So you can say as an IEQ auditor, you can choose any one of these two and go for it. Both have their own advantages and disadvantages. So then coming to the lighting section, which is the third section, visual comfort. Usually we are talking about lux level only, that okay, 300 lux or 400 lux on a table, working table in office is good. But we do not talk about what quality of lux is there, whether it is a light, whether it is a yellow light or a white light or cool white or warm white. Are all lux levels same? So that is basically the point. And what we recommend through this standard is not just the lux level, EML, the full form stands equivalent melanopic lux, which means the quality of light concept, which you can see in this figure. So in this figure, you can see 6 different colors, and lux level in all these 6 boxes is same, but the perception, the contrast and other things that you can see in the red box is worst, and it changes when I change the color of this. So this is precisely the point why we say that only looking at the lux level is not important, and you should actually talk about the quality of light. So what is to be done is there are conversion factors given in this standard. The luminaire properties are to be modified as per the quality of light that it delivers. And then suppose 300 lux CFL is there, whereas 300 lux LED with cool white is there. Both the 300 lux things would result into a different value of EML. Maybe a cool white would result into a higher EML level, and the warm yellow would result into a lower EML. So those kind of situations may be there. So do not just stop. The message is do not stop only by measuring lux level. Look at the quality of light and then settle down with the lighting design. So also in addition to this, what you also have to look into is uniformity of light. This should not be high contrast, otherwise it results into blind spots and so and so forth. Ratio of background light to foreground light, those things are also there. So those limits are prescribed in this standard, and you should be measuring all these points. Last section is acoustic section, and acoustic section defines 3 things. One is the noise level limits. What is the noise level limits if you target to have a class A or class B or class C? Reverberation time is very important because it governs the echo in my office, and therefore reverberation time is to be a very important parameter. And third is speech transmission index, and speech transmission index is basically the deterioration of sound when it travels from point A to point B because of the acoustic properties. So these three things are defined in this acoustic section, and so different kinds of spaces require different kind of noise criteria, different kind of reverberation time, and different kind of speech transmission index, as you can see in this table. So what you need to do is you need to identify what kind of space you have, whether it is an office building, for example, private office. So I should not have speech transmission loss of 0.5 or 0.6 if I am in class B or class A building, because otherwise the communication between the persons who are sitting in this office will not be that good. So that is what is defined in this particular standard. Last question which came to us after defining these is, are these levels achievable? And therefore what we did was we conducted a kind of a project in different buildings. Jaipur and Chennai, why they were selected, the reason was Jaipur lies in composite climatic zone, Chennai lies in warm and humid climatic zone, and we studied these parameters throughout the year. For 1 year, measurements were taken in different kinds of buildings, institute buildings, office buildings, residential buildings, malls, and then in addition, we did occupant satisfaction survey and everything that is defined in the standard to see whether we have defined something achievable or non-achievable. This kind of project was taken together with IIT, by us with IIT Madras. So what we did was we question is designed to record various effects, for example, sensation, comfort, and so on and so forth. So we executed this questionnaire on several thousands of collected out measurement and other things. What we did was, what we found was, I would request you to focus on the last line, which is highlighted with green color. The occupant satisfaction survey of indoor air quality, thermal comfort, and lighting comfort is found to be 80%, 81%, and 89% respectively. Means 80% people were found to be okay with the indoor air quality. 81% of the occupants whom we studied were found to be okay with thermal comfort, and 89% of the occupants were found to be okay with uh, the lighting quality. Now look at the values that we got. Air quality, where we noticed that 80% of people said they don't have any problem. Actually, where are we? So this dotted line at the bottom of this left-hand side graph is threshold value for class A. That is 15 microgram per meter cube, and 25 is for class B and class C. And you can see that most of the points are actually above class B and class C. Not many measurement points were actually in the compliance range, whereas people said that they are still comfortable. So there was a mismatch between what measurements were saying and what people were saying, and that made us quite worried whether perception of people is right or instruments are right. So we got our instruments recalibrated and measured again, but still the same thing. You can see on the right hand side what is there in PM10. The nail is the same story. A lot of samples were there above the threshold values, but still people said they are comfortable. 80%, mind it, 80% people, just read the bottom line again. 80% in air quality, 81% in thermal comfort, 89% in lighting comfort was the opinion that was coming up. So that is really surprising. And seasonal variations of variations in illuminance. In illuminance, again, you can see this dotted line is the threshold of EML level. And what is there? Half of the samples, half of the subjects have good illumination, but half have bad illumination also. So half are under illuminated, but still you can see that 89% of the occupants said that we are comfortable. And this is what makes us think whether to rely on measurements or whether to rely on occupant survey. And this is where I would like to conclude today's talk. So first is IEQ standard is implementable. That is what we concluded. We had a lot of measurements, but because of shortage of time, I have cut down the measurement related graphs. But yes, more or less they are implemented. It is not that something unachievable is mentioned in the standard. Second is it can provide more productive information. It can provide more productive environment in building. If you have good IEQ, your environment can be more productive. Third is threshold levels are achievable with conscious building design and system design, and basically proper maintenance and other good practices. So if you have threshold levels not achieved as of now, make sure that what modifications can easily be done in your building, and make sure that you are doing that. Your system design, if it is nicely done, you can whether it is air conditioning system or lighting system or any other system, you can still achieve those things. Two very important conclusions. Occupant opinion only is not sufficient. What I found many people saying that my building is very good, nobody complains in my building. Nobody complains doesn't mean that your environment quality is good. We have seen through the statistics in previous 2-3 slides that opinion of occupants may be good, but still the environment may not be that good. So that is one mismatch that you have, and therefore what we recommend is do both. Do occupant satisfaction survey and take measurements, and then conclude about your indoor environment quality. IEQ performance parameters, the last bold bullet, IEQ performance parameters should be included in basis of design, which is not being done as of now. I have at least not seen any consultant or any building promoter demanding that, okay, whatever you do in your HVAC system, I do not want my PM 2.5 to be more than 15 micrograms per meter cube, or I do not want TVOC to be higher than this, or I do not want my transmission loss of sound more than certain percentage. Okay, so this kind of parameters are to be included right in the basis of design stage. Maybe background noise, you distribute air, so temperature is good, but background sound is very good when your air distribution system is working. That is not good. So doing good on one parameter adversely affecting on other parameter is not the right approach. So building owners should become more and more demanding, and then it imposes a challenge on HVAC consultants community. If building owners become more and more demanding, your skills for designing systems need to be improved, especially considering what makes an environment better, what doesn't make an environment better, what effect one parameter has on other parameter, and so on and so forth. You need to understand the interrelationship of all these parameters very nicely. I will stop here, and if there are certain questions, I would be more than happy to answer those questions. Kishan, over to you.
Sure. So we are taking few of the questions. So first question is from Mr. Nitesh Kumar Dikshit. The question is, what are suitable air quality models for PM 2.5 dispersion in indoor environment from outdoor traffic?
PM 2.5, actually, if you have to stop, you need to have good filtration. Actually, why green buildings motivate you to use HEPA filters or MERV filters is because of that reason only. In fact, in our COVID document also, if you have downloaded that and seen that, you would see that we are recommending H13 or better filter, because that also is likely to prevent, in addition to 2.5, it is likely to prevent spread of coronavirus also. So filtration is the best method for preventing PM 2.5 and higher, any PM for that matter.
Okay, coming to next point, that is from Nitesh Kumar. Again, Nitesh Kumar, what is reliable and accurate instruments to measure indoor air quality?
I would suggest that you look at the accuracy and you look at the resolution. And there is a full table that we have given in the standard. And if your equipment resolution and accuracy is matching, or it is better than that, that instrument is good. I would specifically not like to make any brand because I may be seen as promoter of that particular brand. So I would avoid that, but look at the accuracy, look at the resolution. Same company may offer 2-3 types of instruments for the same measurement, but one may be having high accuracy and good resolution, one may be having low accuracy and inferior resolution. So actually it is the resolution and accuracy that should be used for taking a decision, and not just the brand.
Okay, coming to next question, that is maintaining IAQ well in desired levels in an office building, how important is to maintain CO2 level over the other parameters, and then how important demand control ventilation is in Indian condition?
That's a good question, Kishan. And so CO2 is something which is easy to measure because the sensor is not very costly. It is a few hundred rupees only. And what we think is that CO2 is a good indicator about presence or absence of other parameters, unless you have a very strong source of any particular pollutant. So if your CO2 level is under control, it is quite likely that other parameters would also be under control, because low level of CO2, typically ambient plus 300 is what we consider as good. So if it is ambient plus 300 means ventilation in your office is pretty nice. And if your ventilation is pretty nice, any pollutant, even if it is emitted in your office, is likely to be thrown out of your building very easily. So if you have to measure only one parameter out of all indoor and air quality thing, CO2 is important, and that is why demand control ventilation becomes very important. If CO2 is high, you are likely to have at least one of the other parameters also high, if there is a source particularly sitting in your building. So demand control ventilation, again I repeat, is very important, and it is important to keep low CO2 level. Do not allow it to exceed ambient plus 300 or ambient plus 500, because if CO2 is low, means ventilation is high. If ventilation is high, other pollutants, including coronavirus, I emphasize, are likely to be low.
Okay, so this question was actually asked by Mr. Akash Vajpayee, past president. I hope he will be satisfied with the answer as explained by you. Coming to next question, that is how we can define environmental regulations for built environment. How can we ensure desired quality of environment in and around the building?
These are two different things. One is in building and another is around buildings. So precisely to address this question, the standard which ISHRE has come up with was developed. So there were nearly separate regulations there. I'm not saying that there are no regulations. There are regulations. In fact, NBC document itself talks a lot about indoor environment quality, but in bits and pieces, not in a comprehensive manner. And a few things were kind of more emphasized, few were less emphasized. And therefore, this standard was brought up to address this particular question only, that if there is no standard, let us bring a standard. And if this standard is adopted by any lawmaking body, for example, you can say Bureau of Indian Standard or Central Pollution Control Board, it becomes a code. So the difference between code and standard is code is a mandatory thing, code has a legal binding. Standard is a voluntary thing. Organizations like ISHRE can only develop standard. Codes can be developed or a standard can be converted into a code by a government body. So we hope that some government body will take up this standard and convert into a code and make it a legal binding.
Okay. Coming to next question, that is from Mr. Rutwan Sheth. In the Indian context, how should we factor in natural ventilation while designing of a HVAC system of a building? PPM calculations, filters, and IAQ is predictable under circumstances where the user wants to open the windows. I'm not pretty sure the question is. I'm repeating the question, sir. I hope you can see the question, sir. I'm repeating it. In the Indian context, let me unmute the participant. Yes, Mr. Rutwan Sheth, you are unmuted. You can ask the question. Okay, we'll come back to him.
I can't hear it.
Okay, we'll come back to him later. Coming to next question, that is, what are the methods to balance use of inlet solar energy and thermal standards of a building?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What are the methods to balance the use of inlet solar energy and thermal standards of a building? I mean,
solar energy.
Yes. Question is not clear. We are unable to unmute it.
Okay.
Coming to next question. Can we use ESP filters instead of HEPA filters?
You can, depending upon the cost. ESP filters would have an operational cost and first cost, so you have to have the cost benefit analysis done. You can use ESP filters also. People are using actually, so you can do that.
Okay. Another question is there any way that we can use lenses to multiply the inlet of solar energy, it will be lighting energy, and hence minimize the lighting energy requirements, maybe lighting pipes, all about lighting pipes, light pipes.
Yeah, so this concept is basically the light pipe concept. People are using, in fact, there is one installation in Jaipur itself. We had done it long back in the manufacturing unit of REEL, Rajasthan Instrumentation and Electronics Limited. They are manufacturers of solar panels. So in their manufacturing unit, solar energy is brought in through use of good reflective internal surface of pipe and use of lenses, and they are illuminating interiors which are otherwise dark through solar energy only and not using light. So yes, that is a concept being used by many people in buildings. Maybe Kishan, we can take the last question now.
Yes. So I think we are done with a few of the questions. There are many questions are there, but I think now due to time limitation, we are closing it. So back to Sandeep ji. Sandeep ji, please.
Thank you, sir. It was an incredible session. Now I request Pradeep sir to give vote of thanks to sir. Pradeep Sharma sir.
Pradeep ji, please unmute your mic.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, sir, audible.
Hello. Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is Pradeep Sharma, immediate past president, ISRE, Jodhpur subchapter. Personally, I would say that it is always incredible to hear Mr. Jyotirmay Mathur. Whenever I hear him, I go mesmerized. This is really a magical experience to hear him, and I salute his depth of knowledge. I really thank him for joining the this distinguished technical talk, and I would like to call him again and again for Jodhpur subchapter. Thank you very much, sir. Hello.
Welcome, Pradeep. You are most welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So we have lots of participants who are non-members as well. Anyone would like to take a membership of ISRE, please follow the page which I have opened on my screen. You may click on the button here, membership plan. You can opt either 10 years membership or 3 years membership, and you can be a part of ISRE family. So at the end of the session, I'm playing the ISRE tune, and we are concluding this session. Thank you.